Well, figures obtained by CTV News and a Freedom of Information request show Vancouver police stopping some visible minorities for so-called street checks at a far rate higher than that exceeds their share of the population. It was happening as late as last year, as CTV's John Woodward reports on the controversial data and the allegations of racial profiling.
The Vancouver Police Department in the midst of changing how it goes about the controversial practice of street checks.
This is something urgent that needs to be dealt with.
CTV News obtained 2019 data through a Freedom of Information request. The figures show checks of Indigenous people stayed constant, about 6.5 times what you would expect from their share of the population, even after the racial disparity put the VPD under scrutiny in 2018. Checks on Black people rose to just over 5 times. Middle Eastern, Caucasian, and Hispanic people are stopped slightly more often than population. That rose slightly. South Asian people stopped slightly less often, and Asian people stopped about 7 times less than their share of the population. That dropped even further.
Disappointing, right? Because we know that the rates of violent crime in Vancouver are going down. And if anything, the fact that street checks continue to happen really is, they point so clearly to profiling.
The data say officers stop people for a variety of reasons, including suspicious behavior or suspected criminal activity. But almost a third of the time, the biggest fraction, the reason officers gave for the stop is something called problem-oriented policing. The VPD on Monday announcing the creation of a new unit designed for lower priority policing, a deployment based on a survey of Vancouver residents.
After 1 week of being operational, the team has already been dispatched to over 200 calls.
Meanwhile, BC Solicitor General says provincial rules are part of the reason the VPD's street checks in 2020 have dropped over 90%.
We'll look at all aspects of the Police Act, but and they may well, want to look further at police checks.
A committee to examine racism in policing after the death of George Floyd was dissolved during BC's election, but Mike Farnworth says it will be reconstituted when elected MLAs return to Victoria. John Woodward, CTV News, Vancouver.